Welcome to Reason for Truth. Today I want to talk about globalism. But here's a fact. It started with the Tower of Babel, believe it or not. We often think of globalism as a modern concept. But listen, nothing could be further from the truth. Today I'm going to show you that what we consider modern day globalism is an attempt by simple man to consolidate and centralize power against God's will and seriously against God's people. So let's get started. Everybody, welcome back to Reason for Truth. WO Stephen Garofalo. Listen, Reason for Truth, we always state the truth up first, and then we back it up by all the reasons. But we're always constantly learning because we want to make sure we learn well. If you don't learn well, you're not going to teach well. And so I'm here to help you teach and for you to learn. So welcome to Reason for Truth. According to Webster Dictionary, globalism is defined as a national policy of treating the whole world as a proper sphere or a single political influence. Really? Of course it is. Webster then adds two additional things. It says subheadings, which includes imperialism, that's what it is. It puts imperialism under globalism, which is governmental power over an entire country and often over smaller, weaker countries through influence, but more often through military power. No kidding. Secondly, it speaks to internationalism, which the Webster Dictionary gives an example as the era was marked by an expansion of liberal internationalism. No, but notice how it doesn't say conservative. Liberal internationalism, economic globalization, and U.S.-led and constructed multiculturalism. No, that's what it says. I mean, that's where we're at. You could debate that if you want. That's what it says in the Webster's, which is really a reflection of culture. To find a politician that didn't have children would be weird. And it should be weird. You shouldn't be governing people if you haven't had children for your own. In most cases, people are going to say, Steve, that's crazy. No, because you see the world differently. You don't know what it's like to have to sacrifice to give to others, and you don't really have a vision for the world that you're passing on outside of yourself. Period. Some people say that okay, you could have a PhD. But that doesn't compare to understanding what it's like to bring life in the world and to have and create a world and manage and govern a world that the next generation is going to inherit. Why? Because if you've got skin in the game, i.e. your own children, you're going to want a good world. You're not going to want to flood it with Muslims and people from countries that are extremely poor to make slaves out of your children. Okay? To be fair, some of these leaders have stepchildren, but it's not the same even so, but I'll give you credit there. Even for those with children, most have 1 to 2 children at the very most. Why? Most people, it's due to financial reasons. That's unbiblical. It's going to be accountable in God's eyes. God called us to be fruitful and multiply. The Muslims seem to be getting that much better than we do. So my point is that when people have no family legacy, they don't care about what comes next in the world as much as what it means for them purposely in the moment for their own materialistic money, power, pleasure, recreation, whatever you want to put in that slot. That's what fills that slot because there's nothing that comes after them. They're like, well, whatever. Once I die, I'm gone. Let's take a look, though. Get back to the Tower of Babel as it's depicted in Genesis. The exact year, by the way, the Tower of Babel was built is unknown, as the biblical account of Genesis does not provide a specific date, but it is estimated to have occurred around 2400, 2200 BCE, shortly after the biblical flood and during the time of Peleg's life, according to the interpretation of the biblical timeline. Interestingly, though, the Tower of Babel was built in order to prevent people from scattering throughout the whole earth. Again, I want to reiterate, that's in direct defiance, as stated earlier in God's command in Genesis 9:1, to scatter and multiply. Complete 180, complete opposite. Not to withdraw, not to retract, not to leave the hands of leadership in the hands of a few. That's what made America great. By the people, for the people. Remember that part? Not for the government, by the government. Listen, the tower, unlike ziggurats were massive, steep temple towers with rectangular bases, really with receding stories that they were built for the purpose, bottom line, of worshiping a deity. But the Tower of Babel was built on the contrary, was built on a rallying point as such, as a symbol of their own fame as many gods. Notice that God says in verse 6, and nothing they propose to do will now be impossible for them, in light of verse 4, which says, come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower which sits on the top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves. Boy, everybody wants that on social media, do they not? Not God, lest we be dispersed over the whole face of the earth. I think social media has this whole thing. We want a name, how many clicks, how many likes. Who really cares? What does God call you to do? It's probably something very different. In some cases, yes, the social media is an important thing. We should use it, but it shouldn't be our centerpiece. Listen, the Tower of Babel was being constructed not as a worship tower to the Lord, but to reach the heavens, not to speak to the heavens, but to reach the heavens to be equal with God. And this is the sin, right? Same sin. Who made this mistake? Remember Lucifer, Satan? That's right. And what happened to him? He was demoted. He was dethroned from his position as head of all the beautiful, the angels. He was the most beautiful angel ever created, and he had it all, and he threw it all. But we do the same thing, right? We're sinful human beings, but some people take it too far, and they seem to want to build their Tower of Babel, some kind of name for themselves here on earth. And what do? We go, I want that too. No, we should want what God's word says. More humble, that's where you get the peace of the Lord. We too want the same thing, and we have to admit and then make sure that we manage that. But what amazes me in closing here is that God has wiped out, better yet, cleaned out the ark of this sinful, despicable human effort, which was just about the entire population. Remember, he did that with Moses, clean the whole earth out. And I think about that. Gee whiz, it's one thing. You look at Sodom and Gomorrah, they cleaned the town of Sodom and Gomorrah. God burned it up. But at the end of the day, with Genesis, he took the whole earth out. But granted, people weren't living as much throughout the earth as they are now. But mankind and our sinful desires, listen, we waste no time to get back at it. So mankind wanted to build a tower to the heavens. This hyperbole may have reflected the memory of these people regarding the mountains of the east where they once lived and worshiped their false gods. So in the heights, they probably migrated to the plain, right, where the Tower of Babel was, in the very same way that the United States has imported people that are non-Christians. We say, oh, that's multiculturalism. No. Americans build on Christian values. That's a fact. But this American plain on the earth, we don't want to bring in Muslims. No, we don't want that. No, I'm sorry. You could have Muslims here. They just should not be dominating, and then Christians retreating and saying we have no place in political discourse, which is a whole course I did on Equipped Academy. You want to check that out, Christians in Political Discourse. Because that's like saying I'm voting and I'm supporting efforts to be replaced by non-Christian worldview people. No, go read the Old Testament, go read the New Testament. You're going to see very much that's what we're fighting against. Not physically fighting, but we should at least stand guard, make sure that culture knows Christ, and make sure that people are seeking him and not false gods. So anyways, that's my diatribe for today. I want to make sure that we don't let people dominate the Christian worldview unrightly. The Tower of Babel in the end is reflected in this great part through this modern day globalism by way of secular humanism, by the way, because it's, you remember, it become famous. Verse 4 is the Nephilim, the giants, became, before the flood, centralized power for a few in the urban cities, as we see today, opposed to decentralized within the country and the rural areas. So in this anti-global and unbiblical era, we're seeing globalism play out, and now it's beginning to crumble because people say, I don't want that. So in the end, all this goes back to the Tower of Babel, just as it is here in 2025 when I'm recording this, and that mankind, left disconnected from God, is motivated to raise himself up or herself up in attempt for temporal greatness on this earth, for just a little. Motivated by what? Pride, arrogance, sinful, disconnected from God's cause and his way and his meekness and his humbleness. To do what? Make a name for ourselves, make money, right? What's God going to do? He's going to scatter us, all right? Just like the Tower of Babel. We often think of globalism as a modern day concept, but nothing can be further from the truth. Today we learned exactly what we see through the blurry vision more clearly of what's going on with globalism, and that we consider modern day globalism as an attempt by sinful man to consolidate and centralize power against God, right, in his will for the simple temporal goal of ruling power and influence, resources, and others. People like Nancy Pelosi and John McCain, got one Democrat, one Republican, to do what? Rule up to the very end to what? So you can usher yourself into hell more quickly and you're not taking anything with you. Listen, we entered this world naked. We're going to exit naked. And that's all I got to say. Thank you. This is Tower of Babel. I hope that explains globalism to you. I want to recommend a great resource. Go out to equippedacademy.com. Check out just newly released God in Government, Christians' Role in Political Discourse. Has quizzes and everything is very reasonably priced. Make sure you check it out. Get on it. I'm your host, Stephen Garofalo. Until next time, as I always say, this is your reason for truth for today.